Do you ever think about or wonder about the calling of Jesus' disciples? I used to have this picture of them encountering Jesus for the first time, possibly, hearing his call to follow, and almost as though they are in some kind of daze, just dropping all they have and walking along with him. It's kind of a weird image, yet in a way, it's almost like that's what we're given a lot of the time. Many of the 12 disciples did leave everything they had in order to follow Jesus. In the beginning, though, they may not have known what they were getting into, at least not fully. But here in our gospel reading from John for today, we see the results of all they got into as Jesus' disciples. And through the disciple Thomas, maybe we can find that the life of a disciple wasn't so simple. Belief and trust weren't so easy, especially after Jesus died on the cross. So today in our reading, it's still Easter, and the disciples are scared. They've heard from some of the others that Jesus is alive, but they still don't really understand what's happened. What they do probably understand is that there is still some danger for them. Raised or not, dead or not, whatever they witnessed that day or hoped to witness could get them into big trouble. And just the simple fact that they were known as Jesus' disciples could get them into trouble as well. And so they hid, and they waited. But for what? For Jesus, of course. And he shows up that day. He comes to them with words of greeting and peace. They don't have to be afraid anymore, because all that he said about himself had come to pass. He was indeed the Messiah and Lord, the one to be killed and raised for the forgiveness of sins. And he's there to tell them that it was their turn to share what they had come to know, see, and experience through him. A big and scary task, perhaps, but one that we knew many of them took on wholeheartedly. But there's Thomas. He didn't get to see any of this that first day. He wasn't in that room to see Jesus appear or to hear his words of peace, encouragement, and not even to receive the power of the Holy Spirit in that moment. For whatever reason, he's just not there. And really, he's gotten a bad reputation throughout Christian history because he wasn't there. And because he questioned what the others experienced when he came back. So now, today, we often call him Doubting Thomas. And in a lot of ways, that's not really fair. Now, Thomas doesn't always come across as this conventional disciple when he even gets talked about at all. And largely, it's because of that encounter. And in the stories where he is mentioned, he often questions how they, the disciples, can know the way to God the Father. Here, he wants evidence that Jesus has actually been raised from the dead. He wants to know what the other guys had experienced, and he wants confirmation that they weren't just seeing things or hallucinating or something. Ultimately, Thomas wants to know and understand how Jesus could be alive and present, how he could be the way, even after his death on the cross. I kind of think of Thomas as a person going on an investigation. Not one to solve a crime, perhaps, but to understand something that is so unbelievable. Resurrection. He's not a disciple who follows just because someone says he should or because someone else said something happened. He doesn't want hearsay. He wants to see Jesus. He wants to know God more deeply and intimately through the experience of seeing and touching his scars. And what he discovers a week later when he does that becomes his confession of faith. He says, "My Lord and my God." It's by his questions and skepticism that he comes to know who Jesus is more fully than he could ever have imagined. And that's okay. Skepticism and doubt are okay. Investigating and seeking answers about God is okay. that today to all of you in part because of the time that we live in now. We didn't get to walk alongside Jesus through Galilee. We didn't get to see him on the cross. And we didn't get to see him raised from the dead or talking to us behind closed doors. And we live in a time where sometimes it's hard to see God acting in our world because so much other bad is happening. So we investigate, and sometimes we doubt. And we ask questions about this one who we read has been crucified and raised for the sake of the world. We want proof that it's all true. We want to see his wounds too. Thomas got to see in his lifetime a lot of what Jesus did. And yet he still had questions. He still had doubt. As modern day disciples, we need Thomas. We need to know that faith is more than blind following or believing without question. Faith and the trusting relationship we have with God means and involves exploring, doubting, and searching. It was in the midst of Thomas' doubt and searching for proof that he finally encountered Christ. Christ came to him, and he saw the deep wounds that Jesus bore for him and for us. Now we do read that it seems like Jesus gets a little mad at him for not believing right off the bat. But I wonder if that's the tone that's intended as well. What Jesus actually says is that those who had not seen him and have not yet believed are blessed. He doesn't actually chastise Thomas for his questions or his doubt, or for his desire to see Jesus' wounds. Not with the force that we might understand sometimes anyway. But he declares that those who wouldn't get to see Jesus in those everyday moments at that time would also be blessed. They would also get to experience the risen Christ. And this morning I have to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Jesus is talking about us. Today's disciples who are hunting, searching, and yearning to see some sign of the risen Christ in our world. We're like Thomas in our questions and in our doubt. And so we make an investigation of our own a lot of the time because we didn't sit with those disciples 2,000 plus years ago. Some will come to know and experience and see Jesus in the words of Scripture. Others will feel, hear, and taste his promises of life and grace in the sacraments of holy baptism and communion. And we all, at one time or another, will know deep pain. We will understand the one who understands our sufferings as we suffer and endure times of trial and pain. We will see God in Jesus Christ coming to us in all of these ways: sacrament, word, and suffering, and more, by the power of the Holy Spirit coming to each of us on our own and together as a community of faith. Ultimately and really, we will be disciples and live as disciples in whatever way God works in us, in whatever way we experience the risen Christ. Some of the 12 were there from the beginning. They dropped their nets and followed Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem and back again and again. Others, like Thomas, desperately wanted to know the way to God the Father, the way that is Christ. But they just didn't get it in the same way as the others did. They struggled to believe. They struggled to trust in what Jesus had already promised to them. But even for them, there was hope and the promise of resurrection. Every disciple in that room got to see, know, and experience the risen Jesus Christ. And they were all blessed. Blessed by their faith, blessed by their questions, and blessed by their doubt. We today are blessed. We haven't seen Jesus in human form as the physical him plopped into our sanctuary. And yet we believe. We have been told the promises of life that he brought to us by his crucifixion and resurrection. We experience them in wine, water, and word. We are blessed by the complicated and often messy relationships that we have with God. We're blessed because even when we can't see Christ, we know He's with us. We know He will never leave us. And that gives us room to ask our questions or to do our own investigating as we try to understand what the risen and resurrected life means for us now. Maybe we don't need the proof that He's there, or maybe we do. And maybe that will be different for us through different times of our lives. That's one of the beautiful things about the life of a disciple. There's not one way to be. We can drop our nets, or we can be skeptics. The promise that Christ died and was raised for us so that we might know life is there regardless. Jesus, wounds and all, is there. And like Thomas, we are invited to come and see Him and come and see those wounds. We are invited to a relationship with the God who loved us, who set us free, and who granted us new lives of discipleship, even in the midst of our fear behind our own locked doors, and in the midst of the doubt and questions that we wrestle with on a daily basis as Christ's resurrection people. Amen.